Perfect. Okay, I am ready if you are. Do you even know a title?
Yeah.
What's the title?
Self-forgiveness.
Self-forgiveness.
Forgiveness. It's more than saying sorry.
Can we start?
Yeah.
Welcome to the Better Than Yesterday Everyday Podcast, where we cover anything related to behavior change that will increase your long-term wellness and happiness. And now, here are your hosts, personal trainer and RNs, Matt and Jenna Lane.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome back to the Better Than Yesterday Everyday Podcast. My name is Matt.
And my name is Jenna.
We host this podcast every week, Tuesday, 5:30 Central Standard Time.
AM.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. This show is all about implementing behavior change for your long-term wellness and happiness. Jenna, how you feeling?
Great.
We have absolutely settled into a flow. I always started out like that, and then I flip it over to you.
Yeah.
How you feeling?
Yeah, I'm a little distracted because the dogs are sitting under our feet and I can hear them licking.
Hey, quit licking your foot.
Sorry, I was a little distracted there for a second.
It's okay. If you're new to this podcast, thank you for being here. If you're a regular, we could not have gotten this far without you. Thank you. If you are listening to this podcast on Stitcher, Google Play, iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you are, awesome. Thank you for being here. Also, you can watch this podcast on the BTYE podcast on YouTube.
Hey.
Hey. At the top of every show, we hit you with our
Gratitude point.
Gratitude point is something that shifts your perspective. If you're having a downtime, if you're just down in the slumps, we like to think of something that we're grateful for. And it pulls you up out of the mud and gives you beautiful perspective. So Jenna, you go first.
Okay. This morning, I was late to work.
You stole mine. Go ahead.
Because Matt and I got into one of our random deep conversations before I left the house, and we just went down a total rabbit trail and actually followed each other out into the garage and into my car still talking, because we got into this really deep conversation, and just really grateful for that. Even if I was a little bit late to work, it was worth it.
You're grateful for what?
Just how we can just randomly connect that deeply, and that's not something that we were able to do 10 years ago, is really communicate that well and open up.
True.
Other.
You know what? It's I mean, that's actually what I'm going to say that I'm grateful for as well. You have been seasoned in the artistry that is understanding Matt. And I am so grateful for that. There's only a handful of people on this planet that I think understand me. I think that you understand me more than anyone, having been with me for the last 35 years in my head. You understand me the most. So I'm appreciative that you have such a seasoned experience in understanding me, because in my worst times, you have the ability to pick the best words to slap me in the face.
I don't actually slap him in the face, although I do pretend.
In the perfect way. In the perfect way. Like this morning was truly your verbally slapping me in the face and saying, get out of your funk, and this is how you do it. So Thank you. For anyone out there that has a spouse, a girlfriend, a boyfriend, a friend, a parent, a whoever, if they do that for you, if you know what I'm talking about, if you can relate, I want you to text them right now. If you're driving, maybe pull over, but contact them and let them know you're appreciative of it, because I literally wouldn't be on this planet if it wasn't for you.
Well, and what I find interesting is that I can so easily identify when you're in a funk, or even when you just give that generic, I'm fine. And I'm like, okay, you're not fine.
Yeah.
Even when you sometimes I feel like I pick up on that before you do.
Yeah.
And it's the same with me, because I'll just think I'm fine. I'm just going along doing whatever. And you will say to me, there's something going on with you. What's in your head?
Yep.
And I'll be like, no, there's not. I'm just being myself. And then you make me realize that, oh, maybe I'm not.
There's this, I don't pretend to know anything about it, but it's called vibrations. And it's really like, we have a friend that I call a hippie. And I mean that in the most respectful fashion, but this person knows all about this vibration communication technique thing, and I think that's what it is. I think it's just knowing each other's vibes, that thing.
Yeah.
And not everybody has that awareness piece, and I'm really grateful that you do. So enough about me and my idiosyncrasies. What the heck are we talking about?
So I figured we could make this podcast today a little story time.
For the record, I don't know what we're about to talk about.
Yes.
Jenna has not really given me much.
And
the only thing you've told me is self-forgiveness.
Yeah. So it's a bit of a story. Please hang in there with me. I promise I will get to my point.
I promise I will keep my mouth shut.
Good. That is also something that we established before we started.
You're welcome, Andy.
And so to just start off, self-forgiveness is something that I've struggled with for the entirety of Matt and I's relationship. And I think it is, and I didn't even intentionally tie this together, but it's that self-awareness piece that I think a lot of times we lack. We can very easily identify something in someone else that we can't identify in ourselves. So just to kind of give a backstory, growing up, my parents divorced when I was 4. My mom remarried for a couple of years, but all of my teenage years was just my mom and I. I was always envious of my friends who had that like all-American family with several siblings and, parents still together. And I actually made up my own. I had my little sister named, if I had ever had one, when I was a little kid.
What was the name?
Erica Marie.
Okay, go ahead.
Anyway, because I wanted a sibling. I think there's a big significance with learning interaction and all that with siblings, and I just wanted a little sister. And that's not something I ever had. It was just my mom and I spent a lot of time with my grandparents growing up too, but I was always very envious of my friends who had that all-American family. And I really put that on a pedestal of like, that's what I want. That's like my highest achievement that I want to achieve at some point in my life, is that like perfect family. So went to college. My sophomore year, I met someone who, checked all the boxes of, had a big family. He was Italian, so yeah, it was not Matt. Had lots of siblings. They were all very close. They were best friends. Their cousins were all best friends. They all lived in the same neighborhood. And I just really was attracted to, not him, of course, but to that ideal family situation. It just very, very much intrigued me. I wanted to belong to that. So we got married. We were both 21. We moved here to Pensacola, and I immediately found myself struggling to be that ideal wife that he saw in his mom. And we had conversations of, he had never seen his parents even disagree with each other in front of the kids. And that's not how I grew up, and so there was a big disconnect between the two of us of, I've always had trouble communicating my feelings, and I was feeling like I was falling farther and farther behind with keeping up with this ruse that I was this perfect housewife of, 3 home cooked meals a day. And, so he was the only boy. So all of his sisters and his mom like spoiled the crap out of him. So he only wanted to eat a meal that was still steaming, that it was hot enough. And rather than saying like, hey, that's not really realistic all the time. Sometimes your meal's not going to be steaming. I just put it on myself. Like I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. And I started really resenting him for the things that I was not able to keep up with, rather than communicating how I felt. And growing up as an only child with just my mom in the house, I had a lot of alone time. I had time to myself. I had, I like to read, a lot of quiet one-person activities, and that's not how he grew up. So all of his sisters, all of his friends were always at our house. I remember a time I came home from work after working like 14 hours, and I had no idea that anyone was going to be over at the house. And I walk in and there's like 12 people in our house, and it just was so overwhelming. I just had to leave. And these are all things that are my issues that I couldn't communicate. But as a human, I deflected all of that anger and resentment and frustration towards him. It was his fault. He should know. He should understand. He should be doing. He should, it's a him problem. It's not a me problem. So, I just bottled it up, and we grew apart. We stopped talking. We ended up both, making mistakes in our relationship where we knew that it was time to not be together anymore. And, I really struggled with not necessarily not being with him, but not having succeeded in trying to assimilate myself into something that I'm not. I was trying to camouflage myself into being this perfect family person that I that's not how I grew up. That wasn't me. And it was because I had always put this like ideal family on a pedestal. So I was trying to achieve something that I didn't understand. Like there's no perfect family. And then I had a hard time letting go of that. Like he didn't want to get divorced. I did. I was done. And then I made some mistakes that I also could not forgive myself for, to reconcile with him. And we ended up divorcing. And I kept having these recurring dreams, and his face would just randomly pop up in a dream. And I researched signs and dreams and what dreams mean. I randomly Googled that constantly. It seemed to kind of come in waves, and that happened for years after we got divorced. And it wasn't that I still loved him or still wanted to be with him. And it frustrated me that somewhere in my mind was constantly still thinking about him. And that divorce kind of put me into a spiral of not being good enough, being a failure at this thing that I had always wanted to do. And it really put me in a spiral, put me in a tailspin of trying to drown those feelings with food, with alcohol, with going to work a lot, with spending money. And I wasn't fixing the problem. I was actually making it worse because I was eating a lot and gaining weight and, drinking, and, that messes with your emotions and how you feel. And I was spending all this time at work. I didn't need the money. But if I was at work, I was busy enough to not be thinking about anything else. And then I think that feeling of wanting to look important enough or successful enough, I was spending even more money that I was making, and that's how I ended up in so much debt, was because I was trying to fill that void of something missing or that I just couldn't deal with personally. And those dreams of his face just randomly showing up in a crowd and a dream, and the dream wouldn't have been about him, but his face would randomly show up. And it really bothered me that I couldn't figure out, is my mind still going there? Why is his face still coming up? And sometimes those dreams would be several right in a row, and then there'd be months where I wouldn't have it. And I had this aha moment a couple years ago that it was directly related to my mental health. And when I was feeling good about myself, when I was feeling self-confident, when I was feeling like I had a good relationship with myself at the time, not a single dream. But when I was full of self-doubt, maybe some self-loathing, I was in a bad place, his face would appear in my dreams. And his face now has become the symbol of me knowing that I need to check my mental health. And I think I've boiled it down to his face kept appearing because I wasn't dealing with forgiving myself for all these series of events that I just ignored and continued on down that path because I wanted so badly to have something that wasn't meant to be, or at least not with him. And I know the signs were there the whole time. There's some specific instances that I remember when we were dating where in the moment that should have been the greatest moment ever. Like when we got engaged, and it was kind of a disappointing time, which right there should have been like, oh, well, there's something wrong here. But I was so focused on that perfect image that I had in my head that I ignored all the red flags. So there were a lot of things that I had a hard time forgiving myself for. And I've had to work through those. It's taken many years. And I think it's going to be a lifelong struggle of my mental health and forgiving myself and allowing myself to be human. Maybe not specifically for those errors or failures, but I've always had a hard time just allowing myself to be human and making errors and making mistakes. And so I guess maybe my point is, realizing no book could tell me that his face meant that I was in a bad place mentally. But it took me probably much longer than it should have. But now that I've realized that, I understand that when I see his face in a dream, it's my checkpoint of, okay, I need to check my mental health. There's something that I'm not dealing with well. There's something that I'm not allowing myself to be human about. There's something that I'm not forgiving myself for. And I think letting some of that go and actually working through it the last couple of years has been why I've been able to stick to meal prepping and actually lose weight and enjoy exercising and, changing jobs. That's something that I couldn't have done several years ago because I couldn't allow myself to be myself because I was still upset with myself for not being who I tried to be, and I wasn't that person. Does any of that make sense?
So his face was a representation of something that was once bad and quote unquote bad, however you want to phrase it. But you learned that when you started to see that and you were able to separate it as far as the relationship was done, mm-hmm. It was literally a symbol and a signifier that something is off for you at the current at that current moment. Yeah. So expound on that if you'd like. But my next question was going to be, can you give an example of something as far as your self-forgiveness or something that you wouldn't forgive yourself for?
I can think of some examples that I'm not going to talk about.
Okay. Okay.
But I mean, there's examples every day that I have a hard time forgiving myself for. Like, I was going to do something specific and I forgot and did something else. And I've always had a hard time allowing myself those human moments of making errors.
Again, I'm not trying to press you to say something that you're uncomfortable saying, but are you talking about something as trivial as like leaving your watch at home?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I do that a lot.
You've done it. You've only done it a handful of times, but
yeah, just things like that where I forgot my watch
yesterday.
Mm-hmm. And I actually, like, I got to work and realized it and had my 30 seconds of like, what am I doing? Like, why can I not remember this? What is wrong with me? Why can I not remember that? That's something important. And I got like really frustrated with myself for a minute.
So you beat yourself up.
Yeah. And I don't think it's that uncommon to beat yourself up for like regular everyday things. Because we all have a lot going on in our heads. I mean, you forget one thing, that's okay.
I think it's a really common thing for people to be like, oh, you idiot. Oh, you're a dumbass, to say that. And I think that's very detrimental. Mm-hmm. I think that we just mull over it and we don't think it's that big of a deal. But when you constantly tell yourself that you're a dumbass, it's detrimental. And we've said it a billion times that, would you talk to your loved one that way? Would you tell your child that? It's detrimental when you say to them. So it's the same thing for yourself.
Yeah, I agree with that. Because if I would have had a friend going through the same thing, I mean, I would have told them all kinds of different things than I told myself. It was that I was inadequate, or, I was stupid, or whatever it was for the longest time, when, even if that was true, look what it led me to.
What did it lead you to?
I mean, if I wouldn't have been living here in Pensacola, I'm not from Pensacola. If I wouldn't have been living here, I never would have met you. And I wouldn't have that perspective on life either. And I think me understanding all of the ways that I failed before is at the forefront of my mind every time we have a disagreement, or there's something that I'm frustrated about with you or with work or whatever it is. That's helped mold me into how I react now. And if I wouldn't have learned those hard lessons and made those difficult mistakes, I wouldn't have been molded into the person that I am now. I wouldn't be able to stop and think about something before I react now. And I think that both of us would be in very different places, relationship-wise and life in general, I think. So regardless of whether that whole part of my past was all of my fault, or none of my fault, the point is, it's made me who I am today, and I've got to forgive myself and let it go. Because I don't want to be anyone else, and I'm proud of who I am today, and I'm glad that I've gone through it and lived through it. And this isn't a story that I feel like is, highly abnormal, or, I win with the most traumatic story or anything like that. But I think understanding that backstory of why I was so gung-ho trying to create this thing that wasn't really there, I hope kind of gave perspective to why I tried so hard for something that wasn't me and wasn't meant to be. And it is my fault that I tried for something like that without understanding the signs and ignoring all the signs that it wasn't the right thing. But I've learned a lot of lessons that have changed and shaped how I act and who I'm with now.
See, the way I look at it is that it truly wasn't your fault then, because that was your level of education at that moment.
Yeah.
You know, I can't, again, for me, looking back, I can't say that it was, you know, it was your fault or mistake. It's what you knew at that moment.
Mm.
Now moving forward, if you make those decisions, then it's sort of on you. But you've now been through that lesson, which you hadn't been beforehand.
Yeah. Well, and I think I've always said I'm the kind of person who has to learn a lesson the hard way to really understand it.
I think the best lessons, most people have to go through that.
Yeah. Yeah. I just I've sat and thought before, like, it'd be best for me if I could just sit and learn from other people's mistakes. But then they're not as impactful.
They're not. So I'm going to turn this around on me and make it selfish. Do you feel like, so everything that you just said, self-forgiveness or harping on the past, I know a lot of people harp on the past. Do you feel like I harp on the past a lot?
You used to a lot more.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
See, I don't feel like I harp on the past. I really don't. And I come from a family that dwells, holds grudges, looks at the past, holds on to the past. And when I separated myself from my family, I think I started to actually become my own person, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And I honestly don't think that I have problems with letting go of the past or holding on to the past or holding on to like a mistake that I made.
Yeah. No, I don't think you do either.
Now, trust me, I got 99 problems, but the past ain't one. You know,
that was horrible.
That was fire, Jenna. But
what did you say that I hated? Was that Gucci?
No, it was not. No, but I not to make this all about me, but again, I know that a lot of people harp on the past, and that's something I've never felt that I've done. Having said that, I hope you know, if you're new to this podcast, or if you're a regular, or if you watch Matt Lane Fitness, the YouTube channel, I hope you know that we do not pretend to be anything other than who we are. I truly hope you know that I am not attempting to be someone that is trying to be more grandiose than he actually is. That's not me. You know, I put some things on IG and, you know, do little teasers that seem real cool. I'm documenting my process, your process, this process. And I'll tell you the things that I've learned and the things that I believe in. But I just wanted to clarify that real quick, that we don't know it all, but we have learned some things that hopefully we can teach you.
Yeah. We're learning those things daily.
Yeah.
That's why we have more to talk about.
You know, I look at what we do as partially creating, partially documenting.
Yeah.
And, you know, right there this was documentation. Mm-hmm. This was not creation.
Yeah.
So.
Something simple, and I think I may have talked about it before, but something simple that I do when I'm falling asleep to help make sure that I actually fall asleep, and it helps with my anxiety, because a lot of times, and I think this is common for when you lay down and you're exhausted, and then you lay down and then that's when your mind just starts spinning and then you can't fall asleep. So my trick for that is to think about one of my favorite memories with us. And I usually, at least I feel like, just about immediately fall asleep. And so that sets my mind on the right track for what I'm thinking about when I'm sleeping, because, you know, your mind never stops thinking. It also ends my day on a good note. If I'm having a hard time with my self-confidence or, you know, my mental health, the last thing I think about before I'm falling asleep is trying to think about what we'll be doing in a year, or what we'll be doing in 5 years or 10 years. And something like good, like what will that good memory be in 5 years when I'm falling asleep? What will that good memory be in 10 years?
What is one good memory that you can think of, or do you want to divulge it?
I think my go-to one is, well, there's two, and it's in the same spot. Both times we were at that resort in Cozumel. Both of those are my go-to. This is absolutely beautiful there. Like thinking about the water and like the fish, and I don't know, just both of those days are my go-to.
Interesting.
Because it's also calming. Think about the water and have a good time, and I don't know. That's it.
I like it.
I'm not really sure what my point was. What that was.
We went off on a bit of a tangent there, but it's all good.
But I think that helps reset my mental health too. Of if you're focused on the future, if you're focused on the present and the future, you don't have time to sit back and mull over the past. And if you fill your time with enough of the present and the future, you don't have time to look back. You don't want to look back because you're too excited about looking forward. And I think that's something that you've really helped me with, is not sitting in one spot, being stuck in one spot, but looking towards, what do I want our life to look like in 5 years? And just thinking about that, I think, is a lot of motivation to do something different to get to that. A year from now, 5 years from now, 20 years from now.
And, as we were talking about before, how you say you struggle with the past or self-forgiveness or beating yourself up for something you did in the past. I'm the exact opposite. So what I struggle with is thinking about the future and being so futuristic minded, that I beat myself up if I'm not there yet. And it's unintentional. It's not like I sit back and I'm like, man, you're just a failure because you haven't achieved what you wanted to achieve.
You think that a lot.
I know. It's an internal strugglization. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. I think driven people struggle with that. Mm-hmm. But what that boils down to is patience. Mm-hmm. Patience and quote unquote faith in whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
And I think that if you're out there and this is striking you, I think what that boils down to is patience and faith.
There's a reason why I wore the shirt today.
Patience, if you can see what she's wearing, exactly. That boils down to patience, to faith, and to a passion of whatever it is that you are going after, whatever you're pulling towards you.
Yep. And yeah, I think logically thinking myself through my failures, sitting down, even writing down what you've learned from it, committing that to what you're focused on rather than what you actually failed at, but learning from it, logically thinking it through and let it go rather than just keep burying it and not dealing with it. The longer you do that, I've learned, the longer you're going to have to deal with it, and the longer you're going to have to find new things to bury it with.
Well, quit burying it, folks. The wrap up, basically, quit burying it. Your self-forgiveness, beating yourself up, quit burying it and get rid of it.
Yep.
That's it. You got anything else?
I think that's it. I think I talked enough.
A little bit. But it was good. It was good. Guys, if you enjoyed this podcast, do me a favor. Do Jenna a favor as well. Leave us a review in iTunes. Tell us how awesome we are, or if we truly, truly suck. And if you're,
I just want to say, because you always say that.
Yeah, I want the feedback.
If you got to this point in this podcast and you think that we're horrible, that's on you.
That's a lot of effort there, hater. A lot of effort. If you're watching this, do us a favor. Leave us a comment and tell us either how you feel about this topic, and also let us know what you want to hear. What do you want to hear us talk about? We want to know. We truly want to know.
Yeah, so we want to talk about what you want to hear.
Exactly. I actually want to do an episode, and I'll implore you guys right now. Actually, we'll do it right now. Go to mattlanefitness@gmail.com. Send me an email and title it Podcast Question. And I want you to send your question to me, and I will pick a handful, and we will get you on this podcast. I will call you, and we'll have you on the mics, and we'll run through it. I've been wanting to do that. I want to see how the first one goes. If it goes well, we can make it a regular thing. I want to truly include you guys. I think it would be fantastic.
What if I send you one?
You already got a leg in this thing. You're kind of a regular.
I got 2 legs in this thing.
You got to stop, and that's where we end the show, folks. Thank you so much for being here. We'll talk to you next week.
This has been the Better Than Yesterday Everyday Podcast. We want to thank you for listening and invite you to subscribe to the show as well. And follow Matt Lane Fitness on YouTube. Until next time, you don't have to be perfect. Just be better than yesterday, every day.
Woman, you are a nerd.
Why? Oh, because I said 2 legs.
Yeah, it's like a dad joke right there.